I own 42 acres of commercial land just outside a little town called Millhaven, Alabama, right off Route 17. Nothing glamorous about it either, just open ground. A faded wire fence, a couple oak trees that somehow survived every storm for 30 years. The kind of property developers suddenly become obsessed with the second a city council starts whispering words like growth corridor and retail expansion. I bought that land back in 2002 when nobody wanted it, back when there was one gas station, one diner, and a Dollar General that looked like it lost a fight with a tornado. For nearly 2 decades, I leased most of it to a cattle farmer named Leon Mercer, old school guy, denim overalls, carried cash folded inside a tobacco tin. The type of man who still called everybody brother, even if he barely liked you. Things were simple back then. Then Horizon Gate development rolled into town. And let me tell you something about developers from big cities. They always arrive smiling like pastors at a barbecue, shaking hands, complimenting your land, pretending they respect the community. Meanwhile, they're already calculating how to carve it up before dessert gets served. Horizon Gate bought the 60 acres directly behind my property in late 2021, and within weeks they announced this massive retail plaza project. Coffee chains, outdoor shopping, restaurants, luxury apartments. All the usual copy-paste nonsense they build everywhere now. A week after the announcement, I got a phone call from a guy named Trevor Klein, Horizon's acquisitions director. Smooth voice, expensive watch energy, you know the type. He starts buttering me up immediately. Mr. Dalton, he says, your frontage is strategically important to the success of the project. That's corporate language for we need your land, and we thought you'd be easier to manipulate than the county zoning board. He offered to buy my frontage acreage outright. I told him no, politely at first. Then less politely after he kept talking like he assumed I'd eventually cave if he threw enough numbers around. I told him if the project succeeded, maybe I'd consider a temporary access lease later on, but the land itself wasn't for sale. That should have ended the conversation. Except people like Trevor don't really hear the word no. A few months later, construction started behind my property, and it looked like somebody dropped a small army into the middle of rural Alabama. Bulldozers, dump trucks, excavators, concrete crews, utility contractors, everybody moving around like ants on a dead squirrel. Honestly, I didn't care. Their project, their money. Then one Thursday morning around 6:15, Leon called me sounding more confused than angry. You need to get down here, he said, because these idiots just paved part of your property. I remember laughing at first because it sounded too ridiculous to be real. Pave my property? What does that even mean? I drove out there anyway, half expecting it to be some misunderstanding with gravel or construction overflow, and the second I pulled up, my stomach dropped. They had paved nearly an entire acre of my frontage land. Fresh black asphalt stretched across my property like a damn airport runway. Bright white parking lines, handicap spaces, decorative curbs, light poles already installed. They even had landscaping islands cut in with baby trees planted inside them like they were proud of themselves. These people had literally built part of their shopping center parking lot on my land without ever asking permission. I just sat there in my truck staring at it for maybe 30 seconds trying to process the sheer audacity of it. Then I called Trevor. He answered sounding cheerful until I told him where I was standing. Suddenly the tone changed. Well, that doesn't sound right, he said, dragging the sentence out like he needed time to invent a lie. Our survey team mapped everything before construction. I told him he better send somebody immediately because I was looking directly at asphalt sitting on my property markers. About 2 hours later, he called me back, except now the fake friendliness was gone. Okay, he said, there may have been a minor survey discrepancy, minor discrepancy. That phrase still makes me laugh. According to him, their engineers believed shifting the parking area slightly improved traffic circulation and pedestrian flow. Imagine trespassing on somebody's land and then explaining you did it because the geometry looked cleaner. Then came the part that really told me who I was dealing with. Trevor says, honestly, this could work out well for both of us. We'd be willing to compensate you generously through an easement agreement. See, this is a psychological trap developers use all the time. Create the problem first, then offer the victim a chance to profit from accepting it, because they assume greed will overpower principle. But what bothered me wasn't just the land. It was the arrogance. The assumption that because they were spending millions nearby, normal rules no longer applied to them. I told Trevor he had 7 days to remove every inch of asphalt from my property, or I'd handle it myself. He laughed, actually laughed, then said, "You wouldn't destroy a brand new parking lot over a technical issue." Technical issue. That's when I realized these people genuinely believed ownership laws were just obstacles for smaller people, suggestions instead of boundaries. And that's the moment this stopped being a land dispute and became personal. Now let me pause the story for a second because this is where a lot of people watching are probably thinking the same thing. How does something like this even happen in the first place? And honestly, it happens more often than you'd think. Especially with large commercial projects where developers are juggling contractors, survey crews, zoning deadlines, investors breathing down their necks. Everybody rushing because every extra day costs money. According to standard procedure, before any commercial paving starts, there are supposed to be multiple verification steps: boundary surveys, engineering approvals, staking inspections, utility clearance checks, all of it. So when somebody accidentally builds 80 feet onto another person's land, that's not some harmless little oopsie. That usually means people ignored warning signs because fixing them early would and oppose VE slowed the project down. And from a legal perspective, this is where developers sometimes gamble. They assume the property owner will eventually accept compensation because removing completed construction becomes expensive and embarrassing. It's basically corporate pressure psychology. They create a situation where fighting back feels inconvenient. Then they offer money so they can frame themselves as reasonable. This is a psychological trap because once somebody accepts payment after the fact, the entire power dynamic changes. Now suddenly the trespass becomes a negotiation instead of a violation. And the truth is, a lot of folks do cave under that pressure because lawsuits are exhausting, expensive, stressful, especially when you're going against companies with giant legal departments. But the lesson here is simple. Property lines are not suggestions. Doesn't matter if somebody spent $50 or $50 million. If they knowingly build on land they don't own and then try to pressure the owner afterward, courts tend to look very badly on that behavior. Especially when there's written notice involved, which, fortunately for me, was exactly where things were headed next. The same afternoon Trevor gave me that smug little technical issue speech, I drove straight into Birmingham and met with a commercial real estate attorney named Vanessa Cole. Now Vanessa wasn't flashy, didn't do the whole TV lawyer performance, no giant office, no dramatic speeches, but she had this terrifyingly calm energy that made people nervous without her even trying. She listened to my story for maybe 5 minutes before she stopped me and said, "Do you still have your original survey?" I told her I kept every document related to that property in a fireproof cabinet at home because my father drilled that habit into me growing up. Best decision I ever made. We spread everything out across her conference table: deed records, county plats, tax maps, utility easements, old surveys from 2002. And within an hour she already looked annoyed. Not at me, at them. She pointed at the survey overlay and said, "This isn't even close. They crossed your western boundary by nearly 83 feet. 83 feet. Not inches. Not some tiny overlap where a fence post got misplaced. They built an entire section of commercial parking directly onto my property like they assumed nobody would challenge them." Vanessa immediately ordered an updated independent survey just to eliminate any possible argument from Horizon Gate. 2 days later, the survey crew confirmed the same thing. Clear encroachment. No ambiguity whatsoever. That's when Vanessa drafted the demand letter. And let me tell you, there's something deeply satisfying about watching a competent attorney professionally dismantle somebody's arrogance on paper. The letter included survey diagrams, photographs, timestamps, property records, and a 7-day deadline demanding complete removal of all unauthorized improvements from my land. Asphalt, curbs, poles, drainage piping, every bit of it. Horizon Gate responded 3 days later through their attorneys. And somehow, they still acted offended. Their legal team called it a minor developmental overlap resulting from field alignment complications. That's corporate lawyer language for, "Yeah, we did it, but we really wish you'd stop making it a problem." Then came the offer, $20,000 for a temporary access easement and shared parking agreement. Vanessa didn't even let me finish reading the email before she laughed and said, "Absolutely not." Because here's the thing people miss. Accepting that deal would have rewarded them for trespassing. It would have told them the strategy worked. So we rejected it immediately and filed for injunctive relief plus trespass damages in county court. And once the case reached a judge, the whole tone changed. Horizon Gate walked into court with 3 attorneys wearing $1,000 suits and carrying giant presentation binders like they were about to negotiate a corporate merger. Trevor was there too, pretending not to look at me. Vanessa showed up carrying 1 legal pad and a cardboard tube containing the survey maps. Judge Harold Bennett reviewed both surveys for less than 20 minutes before asking Horizon Gate's attorney a question I still remember word for word. Are you disputing the property boundary itself? Their attorney hesitated, and that hesitation killed them. Because once they admitted the boundary was accurate, the entire argument collapsed. Judge Bennett leaned back in his chair and said, "Then why exactly is your client's parking lot on someone else's property?" Dead silence. Horizon's attorney tried pivoting into economic hardship, construction timelines, public access concerns, investor obligations, all this polished corporate theater designed to make removing the lot sound unreasonable. Judge Bennett didn't care. From a legal perspective, unauthorized permanent construction on private property is poison in court because it directly attacks ownership rights. Doesn't matter how expensive the mistake becomes afterward. The judge issued a formal order requiring Horizon Gate to remove all encroaching structures within 30 days or authorization would be granted for me to remove them independently and recover all associated costs. 30 days. Fair. Simple. Crystal clear. And somehow those idiots still thought I was bluffing. The first 2 weeks passed quietly. Nothing happened. No crews showed up. No demolition permits. No phone calls. Then around week 3, Trevor called again, sounding irritated instead of confident. "You understand removal could delay the grand opening by months," he said. I told him that sounded like a problem for the people who built on land they didn't own. He tried one last manipulation attempt. "There's still time to settle this like businessmen." That line irritated me more than anything else, because people like Trevor always frame compliance as maturity and resistance as emotional behavior. Like defending your own property somehow makes you unreasonable. Week 4 came and went. Still nothing. Instead of removing the parking lot, Horizon Gate filed a motion requesting a 90-day extension, claiming immediate demolition would create substantial commercial disruption. Judge Bennett denied it in less than 24 hours. His written response was brutal. The defendants have already benefited from unauthorized use of the plaintiff's property for an extended period. 30 days was more than sufficient. That was it. Day 31 arrived on a cold Tuesday morning, just after sunrise. I met a local excavation contractor named Wade Turner out at the property around 7 a.m. Wade looked like somebody carved him out of old lumber. Thick beard, grease-stained gloves, coffee thermos bigger than my truck battery. He climbed out of his excavator and asked one question. "You got the paperwork?" I handed him the court order. He read it slowly, nodded once, then grinned. "Well, all right then." Vanessa came too because she wanted everything documented properly. We notified the sheriff's department beforehand specifically to avoid any accusations later. Body cameras, timestamps, photographs, everything by the book. According to standard procedure, when enforcing a court-authorized property restoration, documentation matters almost as much as the physical removal itself. Around 7:45, that excavator roared to life, and I swear the sound echoed across the entire county. Wade lowered the bucket onto the asphalt near the first row of parking spaces and ripped upward. The pavement cracked instantly. Huge black slabs folded upward like broken ice. For the first time since this whole nightmare started, Horizon Gate's project looked fragile. Not powerful. Fragile. Wade kept going methodically, peeling back asphalt section after section while dump trucks hauled debris away. Light poles came down next. Curbs shattered. Decorative islands disappeared under steel tracks. The entire fake little polished shopping center image they tried forcing onto my property got erased piece by piece. And honestly, watching it happen felt weirdly peaceful. Not joyful exactly. More like restoring balance. Around noon, Trevor finally showed up in a white luxury SUV with the construction manager right behind him. Both of them jumped out furious. Trevor stormed across the dirt screaming, "You are destroying private property." Wade literally stopped the excavator just long enough to laugh. I handed Trevor a copy of the court order while Vanessa stood beside me recording everything on her phone. Trevor looked absolutely stunned reading it. like some part of him truly believed consequences only happened to other people. "You had 30 days, I told him. "The judge gave you every opportunity." He started ranting about damages, project delays, investor losses, breach interference, just throwing legal-sounding words into the air, hoping one might magically change reality. Nothing changed. By late afternoon, every inch of Horizon Gate's parking lot had been removed from my property. The land was regraded, leveled, and restored back to bare dirt almost exactly the way it looked before they touched it. If you didn't know what happened there a week earlier, you'd never guess an entire commercial parking section once existed on that spot. And that should have been the end of it. But corporations hate humiliation almost as much as they hate accountability. 2 weeks later, Horizon Gate sued me for nearly $60,000, claiming destruction of commercial infrastructure and economic damages tied to delayed tenant openings, which honestly was almost impressive levels of delusion considering they were suing me over property they illegally built on my land. But here's the beautiful part. Judge Bennett dismissed the entire lawsuit during the first hearing. Didn't even take long. He ruled that Horizon Gate had ignored a lawful court order, knowingly maintained unauthorized improvements on private property, and then attempted to shift financial responsibility onto the actual property owner after enforcement occurred. Then he ordered them to reimburse my legal fees, excavation costs, survey expenses, and additional compensation related to temporary land restoration. Trevor didn't even look at me while leaving the courtroom, just stared straight ahead with that same expression people get when they finally realize money can't bully reality forever. And the shopping center? It eventually opened 6 months late with a redesigned traffic entrance that avoided my frontage entirely. Last I heard, several original tenants backed out during the delay because investors panicked once the lawsuit records became public. Which honestly makes sense, because if a company is arrogant enough to pave over somebody else's property and hope intimidation fixes it later, imagine what corners they cut when nobody's watching. Looking back on the whole thing now, what still amazes me isn't even the parking lot. It's how confidently those people believed they could rewrite reality if enough money was involved. And honestly, that mindset shows up everywhere now, not just in land disputes. Bigger companies, louder personalities, people with titles and lawyers and polished presentations. They bank on the idea that regular folks will eventually get tired, intimidated, or financially exhausted and just surrender. Most of the time, they're probably right. Because fighting back takes energy. It takes patience. It takes documentation. It takes the willingness to look unreasonable to people who only care about convenience. That's the part nobody tells you. When you defend your boundaries, legal, financial, personal, whatever, there will always be somebody calling you dramatic for refusing to tolerate disrespect. But the lesson here is, boundaries only matter when they're enforced. Otherwise, they're just decorations. And from a legal perspective, this case became a perfect example of why property rights are treated so seriously in American courts. Ownership isn't supposed to depend on who has more money or louder attorneys. If courts allowed developers to keep illegally built structures simply because removal was expensive, then wealthy companies could slowly pressure smaller landowners out of their rights one minor encroachment at a time. That's a dangerous precedent. According to standard procedure, once a court issues a removal order and somebody ignores it, judges usually lose patience very quickly because compliance with court authority is the foundation holding the whole legal system together. But psychologically, this situation is fascinating too. Trevor and Horizon Gate never acted like villains in their own minds. That's the scary part. They genuinely convinced themselves they were being practical, efficient, solution-oriented. This is a psychological trap powerful organizations fall into constantly. Once profit and momentum enter the picture, ethical boundaries start feeling flexible. And when nobody stops them early, that behavior escalates. The lesson here is that arrogance rarely begins with giant crimes. It begins with small justifications people repeat until they stop recognizing right from wrong. In the end, I got my property back exactly the way I wanted it, but I also learned something my father used to say growing up out in the country. A fence line teaches you everything you need to know about a man. Respectful people stop at it. Entitled people test it. And dangerous people pretend it doesn't exist at all. So now I'm curious what you think. If you were in my position, would you have accepted the money and signed the easement? Or would you have torn the whole thing out too? Let me know in the comments.